Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, as you might have heard in our intro, and with me is my expert panel, as always, Amara, Samuel, and Jessica. How are you guys?
Good.
Wonderful.
Great.
Awesome. You guys sound very reserved today.
It's not midterms, like essay season.
Yeah.
End of the semester.
It's miserable.
Fair enough. Well, hopefully today we'll get a little excited about today's topic. But before we start, all opinions expressed are not those of Ryerson or Ryerson faculty and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised. So let's start with an important part of our weekly update. We're going to save the biggest topic for last. We're going to start with the anniversary of Kristallnacht, which happened between November 9th and 10th in World War II, when in Germany they had everybody attack and destroy Jewish businesses, and basically the SS or the Nazis stood by and let it happen. It's an important part of history, and we got to acknowledge that. And it's quite upsetting for me personally, just because it's still happening. You know, in the past 2 weeks, there were vandalisms of synagogues, there were vandalisms of Jewish buildings, attacks on Jewish leaders. What can we do to learn from the past and stop hate in all forms? What do you guys think?
I don't know if we're ever going to be able to stop hate. I think people are, racism doesn't come from knowledge. It comes from ignorance. So I think that the best thing to do would be to educate people, and just see each other as people rather than whatever, group you're attributing somebody to and, whatever you hate them for. But I don't think we're ever going to be able to eradicate hate completely. I think there will always be racists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yep.
Jessica, you have anything to add there?
No, I'd have to agree, unfortunately. I think in an ideal world, we'd love to live in a world that doesn't have bigotry and doesn't have hatred, and it doesn't, just put people to what their identity is attributed to. And, if you could see people for more than, just the person that they are, rather than just their identity group, we'd have a lot less conflict. But unfortunately, like Amara said, racism and bigotry, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, that doesn't come from a place of intelligence, and that doesn't come from a place of education. That comes from a place of just ignorance. And until you can really change ignorance through education, hopefully, and, maybe in many, many, many years from now, with it just being so widely not accepted, bigotry that is, then maybe we could get to a point. But present day, without those education plans implemented, then no, I don't think we'll get away from it for quite some time.
Yeah, it's quite disappointing, but I guess that's the world we live in. But hopefully we can at least make change in our lives and try and educate people, as mentioned. Let's talk about a little more lighthearted news, but still kind of concerning. So Quebec turned away. They rescinded the decision, but they turned away a student from France because they claimed that she didn't speak enough French. Amara, you're laughing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm just remembering that story. I just think it's funny. She's French, so she obviously speaks French. And I think the problem was that, I don't remember what it was specifically, but
It's her thesis.
was in English.
No, one chapter out of 5,
Yeah,
because
that's
it
what
was
it was.
chemistry related.
But everything else was in, so if you can write a thesis in French, you're pretty fluent. You're pretty good, but
yeah. Well, Sam, you're hoping to move to Quebec. What's your take on that? Do you think that because you don't speak, fluent French they do, not yet, but because you don't speak fluent French, you think that you're going to have a problem there?
I think it was just a faux pas, and I think the premier's office acknowledged that, and I think it was corrected fairly quickly within a day. So I think people are just making a big deal out of it.
Yeah. Well, it still goes to show how prideful Quebec is in their French and preserving their language and history, right? But let's move on to our most heated update, which is the Don Cherry controversy. So Don Cherry, as of yesterday, was terminated from Sportsnet for his comments about immigrants not wearing the poppy. This goes down to cancel culture, right? What do you guys think? Do you think that he should have been fired? Do you think that his comments were wrong, outrageous? Because he stands by his comments. He doesn't take anything back. He says, "I'm telling the truth. I'm not a robot." But there were so many complaints that the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council actually said, "We have too many complaints. Stop."
The thing is with that, like I read this article and it was like Don Cherry has 9 lives kind of thing, because this is not the first controversial thing that he's said. He said things against women and he said things against other groups of minorities. I'm not discounting the role that he's played in hockey in Canada, which is, I think, a really big part of our Canadian identity. And I'm not discounting what he has done from that regard. But he also, he's 85. He's pretty set in his ways and he's pretty set in his opinions. And I think it was just kind of the last straw almost, because there's just been such an accumulation of controversy behind some of the things that he has said that are directed at different groups of individuals. So I don't know if it necessarily was just this exact one comment that did him in. I think it was an accumulation of comments. And it was like, it was kind of just the last straw. And I think the vocab that he used to describe immigrants, like "you people," I think that was pretty harsh.
I don't think it was like on its own a fireable offense, but I think it is an accumulation of all the things he said. And you asked about the specific comment. I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying that we should be patriotic and we should wear poppies, but I think he said it was "you people" that come here, so he was talking about immigrants. You can't necessarily tell somebody's an immigrant just by looking at them, and I think that was the big thing. It like he's really saying he sees a lot of people, because he's talking about Toronto, I believe, a lot of non-white people in Toronto not wearing poppies, and assumes that they're immigrants who don't understand and appreciate the sacrifices that those soldiers that we honor and remembrance day made. And I also just want to say a lot of immigrants to Canada come from former or current Commonwealth nations that also contributed to World War I and II. So it's not necessarily just appreciating Canadian soldiers. I mean, on Remembrance Day it is, but I don't think that they don't have any connection to those wars, is what I mean.
Sam?
I saw a CBC article that said that does Don Cherry not a little bit like this? Does Don Cherry not know that not only white people fought in World War I and World War II? And I thought that was such a bizarre extrapolation of what he said. He never said anything like that. He never referenced the skin color, ethnicity of the people.
But what did you think he meant by "you people," like the people he sees in Toronto not wearing poppies?
Recent immigrants.
But how does he know? He's saying he sees a lot of recent immigrants. So how does he know somebody's a recent immigrant by
I don't know.
looking
You'd
at
have
them?
to ask him.
I feel like we can make an educated guess.
That's a racial assumption, though.
No, if you heard a Russian person with a very thick accent, I would.
We didn't talk about people he hears. We were talking about people he sees. I highly doubt he was talking about hearing European immigrants with thick accents not wearing poppies.
Well, you'd have to ask him.
I think that we can
But that's
make
where
an
it stemmed
educated
from, and
assumption.
that's where the, damn it. Sorry, my mic I hit it. There we go. Sorry. Oh, Jesus. Okay, we're good. But yeah, that's where the assumption stemmed from, was just literally based on image. Not talking to anybody, not seeing somebody's status, not
hearing somebody speak with an accent.
Yeah, literally just looking at somebody, and because they don't fit, using air quotes here, that look of Canadian, a look of a Canadian, which is completely, subjective and biased, because there is no real look of a Canadian unless, they're walking around with Timbs and a hockey stick. But that means that could be literally any individual, anybody everywhere. Like, it doesn't just have to be a white person, because Canada is so multicultural, and just to assume that
Toronto.
if you're not...
The GTA.
Yeah. Well, regardless.
I think a Torontonian looks very different than a Canadian.
Regardless, we're a
That doesn't make
multicultural
any
country,
sense.
though.
If
Yeah,
you're
it
born
does.
in Toronto, you're a Canadian.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying the demographic makeup of Toronto is not
Yeah,
representative.
but you said
of the
a
rest.
Torontonian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does a Torontonian look
So
like?
Well, just look at the
Yeah.
demographics of Toronto compared to the rest
But
of
what
the
does
country.
a Torontonian look like?
More
That's what you said.
demographically mixed. Is that not a fact?
I'm not saying that Toronto's
What-
not
like,
more
what's-
demographically mixed, but you said a Torontonian and a Canadian. So
Yeah.
like, what does a Torontonian person look like to you?
I
then?
told you. It's more demographically mixed.
No,
One
no, no. The
person?
singular person.
What does one Torontonian look like? That's what I'm
I'm
asking.
saying Torontonians, as by and large, are not representative of the whole
yeah,
country.
I would agree with that.
Okay, that's all I said.
But I think what Jessica's getting at is that you don't have to be white to be
I
Canadian.
didn't say that.
You don't.
I didn't say you said that. That's all I'm saying, is what I think.
All right.
And I think that Don Cherry's comments make it seem like that's what he does think. And I think that's where a lot of the problems come from.
That's where I think, I think that's the gist
Yeah.
of the whole fireable offense. Not saying that that was like the sole reason. I think it was just after an accumulation of such discussion and past previous history of what he said. I think that was kind of just, the cat had. I thought it was a good way to put it. Like, Don Cherry has 9 lives.
Yeah.
Was it blown out of proportion though, his comments, or no? Because
Yeah.
the fact that you said yeah. Because the fact that the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council has said that they received too many complaints that they cannot accept anymore.
Well, then that means a lot of people are complaining. So it
Well,
might not be
duh,
blown out
but
of
I mean-
proportion. If people are upset, if that many people are upset.
But I mean, we live in such a time where any minute thing people can complain about.
Yeah.
But do you think those comments in general, like out of the biggest thing that he's ever done, because as Jessica mentioned, it's not the first time that he made some negative comments, out of all of them, you think that's the worst?
I don't think that's the worst. I think it's the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think that's what happened. But I think it's like, I mean, like I said, I don't think there's any argument to be made against people wearing poppies. I just think it was the assumptions that he was clearly making in that statement. That's what set it all off.
Half those are probably Americans anyway that were complaining. Like,
Well, just to mess
Yeah.
with us?
oh, well, I mean, I'm not sure to what degree he's popular down there, but I'm sure if you're a hockey fan, you would know of him. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's like he's a staple in,
Icon.
in Canadian hockey, and I know a lot of people saw him as like an idol in a sense, and an educator from the hockey standpoint. So nobody wants to see their heroes and their idols fall, and heroes have flaws. Nobody's perfect. That's why I'm not discounting the work that he has done in his career. I just think as a human being, you gotta be more respectful, and you gotta be more open to things, and you gotta leave your assumptions and your presumptions at the door.
To him, though, his whole persona, though, is cutthroat, right? So in terms of respect, like, he's not always respectful.
I think
Can
there's
be
a difference between, like, he's a hockey commentator, right? So there's a difference between being cutthroat in terms of hockey
And
and
sport.
talking about hockey and whatever. But I think it becomes different when you're talking about, like, I don't want to, like, when you're making racial assumptions. I think that's a little bit different too.
Yeah.
I don't think you have a leg to stand on for being cutthroat towards immigrants.
No.
I don't think that
To any minority
makes sense.
ever.
Yeah. Well, clearly he's gone, and is this going to change the face of hockey, though?
I don't think so. I don't know. I'm not really a hockey fan, but like, hockey's not going to stop. Hockey's not going to stop being the big thing that it is. Hockey Night in Canada is still going to be a thing.
It's a big cultural shift, though, because now it's just Ron McLean, and who's going to be his co-host? Is he going to be
Probably
the
a
main
woman.
guy?
He's also 85 though, so how many more years was he going to do
That'd
this?
be
Ron
awful.
Yeah, it
Don
would be.
Cherry?
Yeah.
So bad. I think it's the end of an era. I'm not a hockey fan, but I know a lot of Canadians are hockey fans, and he was a staple for a lot of people. So I think it's going to be, like you said, I think it'll be a big shift.
I think any kind of obsession with sports is unhealthy, and I see these people that, especially middle-aged men, that get obsessed over it and bet and talk about it. Like, bro, did you catch the game? Like, what are you, 12?
Why can't people bond over a
it's a
shared
community.
Pathetic.
pastime?
Oh, I'm a
Do you
Canadian.
have any
I'm a
fun
Canadian. I drink
ever?
my Timbs and I watch my hockey, bro.
Yeah, but there's
Is
a
that a
difference.
problem to you?
Yeah, it's a problem.
I think that's
It's so
a problem,
annoying.
but I think there's a difference between making that your Canadian identity and
Yeah.
just genuinely liking hockey and
Yeah.
bonding with your friends
Oh,
over the hockey game.
Yeah, that's different.
Okay.
It's a sense of community.
Oh, God.
What's
Bro,
wrong
you
with
guys-
community?
wait, wait,
Do you, like,
oh, my God.
I think it's the same as, like, I don't know, like any sort of pastime. I don't think you should be obsessed with it, especially if you're a middle-aged man with kids and a job. But like,
exactly.
you can talk with your friends at work
Sure,
about
sure.
the game.
But I just don't
think
like the
that's a big deal.
obsession. I think it's deranged. and it's a
Well,
distraction.
like,
You think it's
what do you
deranged?
think is
Yeah,
like
it's
getting
really
a tattoo
weird.
for a sports team or something like
That
that?
is weird.
Yeah, but is like, where do you go into deranged?
People talk about it constantly, and especially during the season, and just obsess over it.
I don't.
Spend hundreds of dollars for games, and
I think people.
Watch
It's
What
their
if they
passion.
enjoy it?
Yeah.
If
No.
they
I don't care. There's plenty of things you can enjoy there.
Why-
Jared.
Why are you
So-
the
What is
person
on
to decide?
Samuel's
that?
list of approved
Okay, one at a
ways
time,
to
one at a
enjoy?
time.
Who are you to decide what people can and cannot enjoy?
No, I can't force them to do it, but I can critique them.
So you're going to judge them more because they have a passion and because they enjoy something, and there's a sense of community and there's a sense of involvement, and a season is not the whole entire year.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it's let's hockey for example, when it's on, people are going to talk about it. People are going to go for their team. People are going to enjoy. It's also a social gathering. Hanging out with all your friends and watching a game. Like, it's a fun event to do. It's a part of. Humans are meant to socialize.
What do you think about like the Olympics? Does that bother you when people
No.
get excited for the Olympics?
No.
too many jobs that creates?
I feel like it's sort of a like camaraderie thing, especially because sports teams are geographically based. Like the Leafs.
Oh, bro.
I know they're not good, but
this new player that wasn't playing on our team is now here, bro. He's our guy.
how dare
It's
people get
so-
excited about
No,
that?
I'm just saying, if
Jeez.
you want a sense of camaraderie and community, this is obviously supplanted it, and it's so silly.
So what's your idea of community? What's a good Samuel definition
Church.
of idea? Yeah,
A church or a local community, people that you know very well.
You have to
share
subscribe
common,
to a specific religion
share common
to be
values,
on Samuel's list
morals,
of approved
ethics.
pastimes.
Sorry. What's to say that this group of friends that are hanging out once a week to watch a hockey game, why can't they have a sense of camaraderie, a sense of sense of shared values,
They can.
shared
It's just
beliefs?
stupid.
It's a false corporate identity.
They're not.
Corporate what?
Well,
Why?
no, they make a lot of money. That's true.
Yeah.
Like, people own teams and they make a lot of
Yeah.
money off of merchandise and games and stuff. But I agree that like an unhealthy obsession with anything is unhealthy.
Yeah, sure, I agree.
Not
But like
everybody's.
just the
But
existence of
but
sports
this is the
and
only one
culture
where I
around
see
it isn't
it's
bad.
totally permissible and promoted. This obsession.
But what is an obsession to you? Like, that's the question.
Something that consumes every talking point you have
Well,
with someone.
I
what
don't think
about
anybody's really
obsession
like that.
with church?
Is that okay?
Yeah, really.
Religious so why is that fine?
Unhealthy obsession with church is healthy.
Because that's perfectly healthy.
How? No. Seriously.
Yeah.
How is being so
Religion.
engulfed with your religion, where that's literally all you talk about? You go door to door trying to recruit people. That's
I don't think
people
so.
to your
Not all
religion.
churches
Let
do
me
that.
talk. That's your entire identity is just God, and just living your life for God, only having sex and only having kids for God, and just procreating and throwing your religion down somebody's throat. How is that a different obsession than sitting with your group of
Than
friends and watching
talking
a
about
hockey
the
game?
hockey game.
How is that different? And how is that okay on one ground, but
You don't think a religion's on the same level as like a hockey
I think
game?
no, we're talking about unhealthy obsession.
Yeah.
How is that okay? But
But I think-
Because
watching
one of
the
them will
hockey-
take you to heaven if you believe in that. Another
Also-
one will, I don't know what.
That's
Religion,
That's totally
anything
a different
can be
argument.
One at a time.
Anything
One at a
can be
time.
used unhealthily. I think if you're using I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody being religious and talking to their church friends about church and whatever. But if you're using religion as a weapon, an unhealthy obsession with anything is unhealthy. I don't think that you should advocate for an unhealthy obsession
For anything.
with anything. I mean,
I think
unhealthy.
obsession is a wrong word.
But so obsession is okay when all you talk about is hockey and when all you
Yeah.
talk about is sport.
No, it's
Yeah.
not okay then.
No, to use the word obsession to
Oh,
describe that is
okay.
okay. But using the word obsession to describe with somebody who is only about their religion and is only engulfed in their religion is not okay to
That
use.
follows the rules of their religion. Is that obsessed?
No,
Or someone that
but
promotes it?
literally just promotes it.
Well,
Like,
you said every conversation. So if you're talking
Yeah.
to somebody who you know is not of the same religion as you are, and all you can talk about is your specific religion, I think that would be unhealthy.
I don't think I've ever met anyone that.
I definitely.
You have?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
I've never
What-
met an unhealthily obsessed sports fan like you're talking
Yeah.
about, though. So
So
Spend more
you'd
time around
probably
guys.
you would call me probably unhealthily obsessed with Celine Dion, wouldn't you?
No, I think you're a fan.
But what's wrong with sports fans though?
He literally only talks about Celine Dion and listens to Celine Dion exclusively.
Yeah, okay.
But that's not
This
an
is true.
obsession.
Exclusively.
you only
you
don't listen to any other music.
What about covers of her?
I have on occasion,
But, like,
to see some.
The only
I like-
artist you have is Celine Dion.
on my phone, yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. But why did this become about bashing me? So
You brought up Celine Dion.
I did because I just wanted to see Sam's opinion about it. But no, I listened to a couple artists. I like Sia and David Guetta.
But when do you
and,
listen to them?
When I find out that they wrote songs for Celine.
Oh.
So Sam Smith wrote a song for Celine. Just saying, if you guys, Anyway, let's move on to our main topic for today, which is a turn from Celine Dion and about the poppy. Capital punishment.
How about sports fans should be capitally punished?
Oh my
Jeez.
god.
Lord.
Sports fans should be put to death for liking sports.
I wanted to make a segue. I don't know.
That's a
So
really
you-
harsh
so
segue.
so all million people that went to march
Don't tempt
in the
me.
Raptors parade should all be massacred.
No, God, I would never advocate for violence against anyone.
You wanted to put him
pro-capital
to death.
Punishment.
That's violence.
That's a judicial
State-sanctioned
system.
violence, but it's still
Well,
violence.
I'll make my argument for that then.
You want the state to get rid of the sports fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's about time.
That's
Are you being serious? Like, honestly.
No,
If Samuel ever runs for office, don't vote for him. It's going to be a dystopian hell.
so capital punishment. Capital punishment, also known as the death penalty, is the practice of executing an individual as punishment for a specific crime after a proper legal trial. According to Amnesty International, as of May 2012, 141 countries have abolished the death penalty, either in law or in practice. Canada is one of those countries, having abolished the death penalty in 1963 for civilians and in 1998 to include military offenses. China executes the most people per year overall, with an estimated, in 2008, 1,718 people. As of April 1st, 2018, 2,743 people are still on death row in the United States. Now, while having been a quiet issue for a while, on July 25, 2019, Attorney General William Barr reinstated the death penalty for federal crimes after 16 years. The federal government also scheduled the execution of 5 death row inmates on top of that. People are divided on whether this form of punishment should still exist. It doesn't in Canada, but will it make a comeback? Today we dive deep into the debate for and against the death penalty. As a reminder, we are live on Facebook, so make sure to comment on our feed, have your thoughts read live on air. So let's begin. Do you support the death penalty, Amara? Yes or no?
I don't know. I can't say yes or no. Kind of.
Kind of.
I think like really heinous criminals like Paul Bernardo, for example, should be executed. But
For our viewers, can you remind who Paul Bernardo was?
well, he was the Scarborough rapist originally, and he killed 3 girls. I think Leslie Mahaffey, Tammy Homoka, and Kristen French. They were teenage girls that he raped and murdered with his wife Carla Homoka. So somebody that does something like that, I think, should be executed. But I think just the fact that if there's not 100% certainty on who did it, like I don't think there should be any chance of innocent people being executed. So yeah, I think in some very rare cases I do support it, but mostly no, I guess. Like I also feel like it should be only for like violent, heinous, sexual offenders, not people who not like drug dealers, for example, or non-violent crimes at all.
Sam?
yeah, I pretty much agree, but I would extend it to people that traffic drugs, like fentanyl.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jessica?
I'm going to go with no. I don't support the death penalty. I think there's a lot of issue with it. A lot of if you look at the statistics, a lot of the victims on death row are predominant minorities and people that can't really afford a long, strenuous trial. Looking at it from the legal perspective as well, because court is crazy expensive. I do see the argument for it, especially in the case of Paul Bernardo, for an extreme example. Somebody like that, who rapes and murders women, does not deserve a second chance, in my opinion. But also there's the argument for is killing them a way out? Shouldn't they suffer for their crime? Because he's in total solitary
I just don't like the
confinement,
idea
so-
of paying for his
No, but
food
the
and
death
housing.
Yeah, but the death penalty is also he'd be on death row for a really long time before he actually was executed. So you're still paying for it. I don't know how old he is now, but I think he's pretty up there.
Rope and a plank of wood's cheap.
Okay.
We're going to get into torture after that, but
Anyway, but what I'm saying, so no, and especially when there is there is always a chance of innocence. There, even if it's 0.1%, there's still a chance of innocence. And I think, especially if you look at a trial, look at the OJ trial. There's, he did it. There's no question about it. But if you can sway a jury, which is what happened in that instance. Wait, was that a jury? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If you can sway a jury, then, and you get that doubt embedded, regardless if he's innocent or not innocent, you can't base it on, a slight, oh yeah, we pretty much think he's done it, but like also there's the hesitation of, oh, he may not have done it.
I think that goes into just like the nature of our justice system. Like we want them to be just and fair across the board, but there's so many variables that go into sentencing and things like that. So I think until we can, like I said, 100% certainty, which probably will never happen.
You'll never find 100% certainty, even with, like, especially in the day of technology, even if you have like some form of video evidence, how do you not know that that's been tampered with? How do you not know that is totally legitimate? And I think it almost gives the legal system a sort of God complex, like, oh, we can sentence you to death and we'll be the people that, end your life, which I think is out of line. So no, I don't believe that it really should be done, especially when there's always the high chance of some sort of uncertainty and some sort of doubt. And there's been many cases where there have been individuals who were later found innocent after more technology has been developed, and you've looked back into the evidence and realized, yeah, they weren't the true criminal, and they've already been executed. So if somebody is dying innocently, that makes up for the person that has been put to death for reason and for cause.
Well, let's talk about then, because Amara, you're somewhat for it, and Sam, you are for it. Let's talk about why you are for it. Why should state-sanctioned homicide be legal?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's homicide. In the case of capital punishment, it wouldn't be murder. So I think
according to the law.
According to the law, yeah, because murder is a legal definition.
Right.
I think because murder is like unlawfully taking the life of somebody else, and if it was state sanctioned, it would be lawful because the state decides what's lawful. So I think that, but why I support it in some cases is because Paul Bernardo is most likely never going to get out of prison. I think he's a dangerous offender, so he probably won't get out. And why should we, keep him separate from everyone else, so he's getting, like, that costs extra money, and feed and clothe and house him when he did these horrible things. He's taken multiple lives. I don't know why taxpayers should pay for his to continue.
And I'd like to say that the state already does commit murder, homicide, whatever. That's why we entrust police officers with weapons, is because we give them the permission to make that call and protect themselves if they feel like they're threatened. So the only question here is whether that justification for force is should it be able to be expanded in a system that is more, the judicial system could weigh in on it rather than just a single police officer. So to say that the state doesn't already carry out executions or homicide I think is a misnomer.
Fair. But are you afraid, though, as Jessica mentioned, that innocent people are on death row? Wouldn't that be a deterrent? Because in the moment when you talk about police officers, if their life is in danger, that's a different situation. But if you're planning it, they're on death row, and then you execute somebody, are you not worried that there will be innocent people? Yeah,
sure. So I agree with the principle of capital punishment. Obviously, it would have to be held to quite a high standard with no room of doubt, whether that would have to be video evidence. But I, again, understand how that can be tampered with, especially going into the future with more technology, or testimony or overwhelming evidence, which is not just eyewitness reports, whatever. So I would have it in for very, very small cases, whether that would be trafficking of drugs, serial murder, rape, treason, stuff like that. Very few instances. I wouldn't have it. Well, then you say China, but they have a huge population, but I think they even execute political prisoners, which I disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
They're very lax with their rules on who gets it and who doesn't.
I mean, those numbers come from China as well, right? So we don't know.
So they could be more, actually.
Probably is.
But do you believe that the death penalty deters crime?
No, it's been proven that it doesn't. Like, there's many police report and many judicial report, and many places where there was death penalty and now there isn't. There's been no decrease in crime. There's been no increase in crime. There's been slight increases in crime in actuality. The idea that, oh, I could be killed for this isn't going to deter somebody in most cases statistically.
You don't think so, Sam?
I think. I remember from my first year sociology course, which was a while ago, I think the professor said that the only thing that deters crime is police presence. But then I have to question, well, why is police presence the only thing that deters crime? And it's obviously an extrapolation of that would be, well, the risk of punishment. So I don't know. I'd have to.
So then,
I imagine the threat of punishment or an increases in the threat of punishment might deter crime. But then you have a certain section of the population that is so desperate or just has some degree of criminality that can't be swayed by those things. So, yeah, I think it does deter to a certain degree. Yeah, sure.
do you feel though that with the death penalty, if people commit so say it increases crime, if people commit these crimes and they know they're going to die for their crimes, doesn't that take away from the justice that should be served? Shouldn't they suffer in prison for the rest of their life rather than just being killed?
I think this could, I think it depends on what you think happens after death. But I don't think that, I do think that life in prison is suffering, but I think that the ultimate punishment is death. I think that that's the worst thing that could happen is your life could be taken from you. So I think in some cases, it is just for their lives to be taken from them. And I think that's the worst possible punishment.
I agree with that.
Do you think, though, that when their life is taken, should it be a painful process?
No.
Not
I
at all?
think
That's pretty
Cruel.
cruel.
Should be the cheapest way possible.
cruel and unusual.
If
I don't
we're
think
using the
that.
justification for, taxpayer money.
I don't think we should spend a lot of money on it, but I definitely don't think that it should be purposely painful. I think that that's barbaric.
Well, according to the stats in the U.S., they still have other methods for capital punishment. The latest one was on August 15th in 2019. The inmate Stephen Michael West from Tennessee was killed by electrocution.
Do we know what he did?
That I do not have, but it would probably be along the lines of murder, rape.
What's his name? Sorry.
Stephen Michael West. So while that's happening,
Tennessee.
from
I
Tennessee.
think the most common is lethal injection, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
That isn't painful when it's done properly. is it?
Yeah,
But
but
I
a lot
have
of the
heard-
time it's botched.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
I think that's inhumane. I don't think that you should be purposely putting people through pain. But I think the cheapest and most painless way you can do it is electrocution. Sounds horrible.
Yeah, but would you say that electrocution is probably less painful, or sorry,
Than
not less
lethal
painful, less costly?
I'm not sure. I don't know how much lethal injections cost.
Stephen Michael West, he murdered and raped a woman and her 15-year-old daughter.
Oh, there
Wow.
you go.
In
Both
Tennessee.
of them. So
Yeah.
both rape and murder. Well, and then in 2010 in Utah, Ronnie Lee Gardner. You want to look up Ronnie Lee Gardner? Was killed by firing squad.
I feel like that's probably
That's
expensive.
horrible.
And
I
I'm
don't have a problem
surprised.
with that.
Is that not probably expensive? Don't you need to get
you know how
multiple
sick
people?
you'd have to be to just sit there and shoot at somebody till they're dead?
Yes, joining the army. I mean, do it all the time.
Noble.
I don't know.
Oh, Jessica, you have more to say on that. You don't think firing squad should exist? You think that's immoral? Tell us
We're
why.
not talking about morality again.
Not again.
Well, tell us why. Tell us why.
I think also for the mental health of the individuals who are standing there and shooting at somebody, or any individual that has to be the final person to kill this inmate, whether it's the person that's injecting the lethal injection or the person that's flipping the switch for the electric chair. That's, I don't know. I think any person, reasonable person, if you want to do it in the eyes of the law, they would be affected by that. You're taking a life. Regardless how you look at it, who the person is, you're still taking a life.
But do you think it's the same? It's not. It's worse, or it's worse than lethal injection. You're still taking someone's life.
I think lethal injection doesn't have. It can, like Mara said, it's more of a peaceful, again, quotations.
Yeah.
It's essentially, it's essentially putting your dog to sleep. It's along the same lines. It's a shot and it puts you to bed.
But do you think the method takes away from the
You're
core,
killing
which is
somebody.
death? You're
You
killing
are killing
someone.
somebody regardless. I don't think I don't agree with torture treatment at all. First off, I mean, I don't agree with the death penalty, but if it's going to be a thing, individuals that are on death row, they're not there for a week and then killed. They're there on death row for years on end. They serve a sentence, and then they get moved to, death row chambers, and then they'll find, and then whenever down the line, could be months, could be years, then they get their actual sentence. So they're there suffering with knowing that there is no out, and with knowing that death is going to be their out of prison. So why do you have to end it if you're going to end it with death? Why do you have to end it with sitting there and shooting at somebody who's completely defenseless? I mean, I think that's just, it's gruesome. Like,
I mean, the same goes for for a killer, right? If they're killing and raping somebody who's defenseless.
But I don't think you should
why
do what they did.
So isn't that Hippocratic? Like, how is it you did something horrible, horrible, horrible? Not that I would ever defend that. That's why I think that they should just sit in like absolute solitary confinement and suffer for their actions. But I don't think it's up to the state to take a life. Like,
that's the concept of justice, right? Because the criminal would be harming an innocent individual, whether it was someone that was like that case we just referenced, a 15-year-old that was raped and murdered. It's completely different. I don't think the application of force in all cases is bad. It depends on who the victim is. And in this case, if it's someone who did those things, it's completely different than who he targeted and who he victimized when he was committing those crimes.
I don't think we should use firing squads. I think lethal injection is the best way to go.
What happens if lethal injection is not available? Which has happened. So lethal injection is not an option.
And it's handicapped people. I read something that person was basically turned into a vegetable.
Yeah, I think obviously that's awful. I don't think anybody's advocating for that. So do you know what they usually do in those instances where lethal injection
in certain
isn't
states,
available?
they either use electrocution, for example. That's one of the
So
other
is it not
methods.
available because the state chooses not to pay for it, or because they don't have the infrastructure?
I
imagine
think
both.
Yeah, both, because it's just in some cases when it is not available, they have the other option. So in many states, it's still legal to do electrocution, firing squad. As early as 1999, there was a lethal gas for the murder, for the state-sanctioned capital punishment. And in 1996, which really wasn't that long ago, in Delaware was a hanging.
Oh, I think that's awful.
that's terrifying.
It's Sam.
I don't have a problem with it. Like,
I
how
don't.
is that worse than...
It gives the state
You
a
don't know how
God
hanging
complex.
is worse than lethal
God,
injection?
the state has a God complex. They have a monopoly on violence.
I
They
don't
can
think
literally
they should-
do whatever. They can spy on you. They tax you with threat of violence. They have their enforcers on the streets that can shoot you if they feel threatened. The state already has a God complex.
Okay, so
we
it
can
shouldn't be extended to them being able to choose if you live or you die, and how you live or how you die. Like, if there's a presumption of innocence in any ground, which there usually is, why is it up to them to decide fully, yeah, you're 100%, even though there's some doubt here, we're going to kill you anyway?
Well, no,
and it
that-
affects so many non-white people. Like, it
I don't think that even has
you look at
anything
the
to factor
statistics.
into.
You look at the statistics. If you are in a position of you have more money and you are in a more of a position of wealth, you are more able to fight a death penalty conviction than somebody who is in a position of poverty.
But does
so
that-
if you look, especially in the States, I mean, it's not the statistics aren't that great for like prominent for in Canada, especially. Like, I'll pull it up.
But in regards to the statistics, you say people who have a lot of money and power. You mentioned O.J. Simpson. He's a person of color, and he had a lot of money, and he
So we
managed to
can
get out of it.
always point
I'm
out
talking about,
outliers.
like,
There are
yeah.
obviously rich ethnic people,
Yeah.
rich non-white people that exist in the world. I'm sure if Oprah committed a crime, she'd be pretty okay with, getting it fixed.
You get a crime. You get a
But
crime.
I think that on a whole, like proportionally, black people in the States tend to be poorer than white people, and the legal system is completely about money. If you can afford an attorney that's not like a public defender, you're probably going to have a better outcome. So I think that's where that racial outcome comes from. And we can obviously point to, rich people like O.J. Simpson who assembled the dream team. So I don't even know how much money he spent on his defense, but I don't think that's fair to talk like when we're talking about the racial
Yeah.
outcomes of capital punishment in the
You
States.
look at the bigger picture of things. Yeah. You look at the bigger picture of things, you're going to see that there's still always going to be a racial binary that's going on, and yeah, there's going to be your exceptions, but legal fees are super, super expensive. And you know, especially if you look at impoverished communities, regardless of whatever prominent races there, I'm not saying that, you know, white people can't be poor, because there's many impoverished communities with white individuals. If you like this strictly talking about like the financial perspective of things, you're going to find somebody that is on, like, look at Ronnie Lee. You were asking about him. Yeah. He didn't come from wealth, and he came from, you know, he was in the middle of a robbery when he shot somebody in the face. Like, that's why he was sentenced to death, and that's why he was that's why he got the firing squad.
He was committing the robbery?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, you can he was obviously convicted for murder and robbery, but a lot of the time, I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of the time when robberies occur, it's not because, you know, I have millions in the bank and I just want to do this for fun. It comes from a place of desperation, and it comes from a place of potential poverty. So if you're going to get, because there's there's other convictions where it hasn't just been murder that you've been convicted for the death penalty as well. It has been sole murder. It has been sole robbery as well. So if you're going to convict somebody because, you know, the position that they were struggling in poverty, and, you know, maybe that was their only thing that they could see that they could do for themselves or do for their family, or whatever the cause may be, there's always two sides to an argument for why somebody may have done something.
But breaking the law, you think that it should be the personal circumstance? Maybe it should be taken into account, but if they broke the law and they murdered somebody, you think that they should be, like, just because of their personal circumstance, that, you know, it should be okay?
I never said that.
Well,
I just
why
said
are these factors even important then?
Because
it
the
just
goal
shows-
should be less crime. It shouldn't be more people killed for committing crimes. And if
Yeah.
that's what we want to
Well,
do,
if you go into a store
have to
and
look-
you shoot someone in the head and you paint the wall in their blood, I don't really care about your socioeconomic
okay, that's great
position.
that you don't. But if if that is happening on a large scale, and it's because of people's socioeconomic statuses, you should care, because you should want less convenience store attendees having their blood spattered all over
Yeah.
the walls.
And you should look at
and
the
that will
bigger
come
picture of
from
things.
Reducing
Yeah.
poverty.
There's always going to be people that commit those crimes.
Nobody said that crime is going to be 100% eradicated. It's decreasing crime.
I would, yeah.
So I think that
I
looking
don't agree
at
with
the
having more poor people.
Look, of course not. Looking at the circumstances that surround people committing crimes, I think, is important as well. I don't think anybody's saying robbery and murder are okay, or that those people who do those things should be fine, because there's plenty of poor people who
My
don't.
understanding, maybe, I guess I'm wrong, is that you said that we should be giving leniency towards
I
these people.
never
No?
said that.
Okay, but
I never said
okay,
that.
okay.
It was the
literally-
conversation about how the legal system is easier for you if you're rich, and
That's
going
exactly
into how
what I was talking
like
about.
crimes like robbery are not usually committed by rich people because they're bored. It's usually out of desperation. These people are obviously violent people in general. That would, because not all poor people do that. But yeah, so, you know, if he weren't desperate, you could say maybe he still would have, but maybe he wouldn't have committed the robbery, and maybe somebody wouldn't be dead, and maybe he wouldn't be dead as well.
But the bigger picture of things, regardless of why somebody does it, and regardless if they're able to afford, if they can pay off all the legal fees to get a more lenient sentence, or they can't and they're forced to take the worst sentence there is, for both individuals, I don't think that the state has the power, because there's still always there's always a presumption of innocence. I don't think it's the state's authority to be able to finally make the decision, okay, we're going to kill you, and this is how we're going to kill you. It's
who has the final say on a legal matter, though, if not the state? You don't think that
I'm saying that the final matter could be, okay, you're in prison for life with no chance of parole. You're in solitary confinement. You have no contact. You're not in general population. That could be the final sentence. And I agree that that should be the final sentence of many, many, many criminals, especially people like Paul Bernardo, especially people like that other individual that raped and murdered a mother and her child. Yeah, I'm not saying that we should have lenient sentences on these horrible criminals. I'm just saying that it's not up to the state and it's not up to the government, especially when there could always be a chance of innocence, that we should inject them, we should kill them, we should do that kind of. And it's also, I find it as sort of it's kind of sort of an out in a sense. I mean, wouldn't you rather know that this person is suffering in miserable and solitary confinement as opposed to they're getting an out of death?
That's what I was bringing up earlier, right? And in terms of that, there have been studies that say, some people say that the death penalty is more expensive than keeping them in
I think
in
it's
jail?
death row.
Death
It's more
row?
expensive. Like if somebody's on death row for years, that's more expensive than if
Because then
they
they're
were
in
not.
solitary confinement
Yeah.
or in some kind of special condition.
And you need to have like, I think it's not a 1-to-1 ratio for criminal and guard, but it is a higher ratio. Yeah.
I have one quick question. So if death row or the death penalty you said is a way out, then why does the state have the power to imprison you for life with a certain degree of evidence, but then not the power to execute you if that is a way out, and that's better for the criminal?
You
Because
can't come
there's-
back from death?
Exactly. And there's still, I mean, look at what I think it's right now. Sorry, what's his name? It's actually the case that I think, Kim Kardashian is working with. Rodney Reed. He's convicted of, I'll pull that up in a minute.
I think it was murder.
Reed, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. There was, he's believed to have, like, he's alleged long, well documented history of assault. And so, but there's also a lot of presumption that like this was all not actually him, and there's a lot of not sound evidence pointing towards his innocence, as much as there is pointing towards his actual, non-innocence. And a lot of like media bias around that whole story as well. So in a case like that, he's on death row right now. If he was just in like the worst, let's say the worst possible prison sentence there is, minus the death row, so prison for life solitary confinement, there's always the opportunity for appeal, and there's always the opportunity for an individual to keep researching a case and hoping that they can provide more evidence and bring it to the court system and say, listen, this is the new evidence that this is with new technology or something, and we've been able to actually prove this person's innocence. There's no way that they could have done this. They can actually go to the court system, appeal the conviction, and bring forth new evidence that would potentially release this person from the liability. But you can't do that because I think he's sentenced actually in a month or something, and they're trying really hard now to figure everything out and kind of move things along in the court system. There's petitions and stuff going on.
Right.
But you can't, like, if nothing works and he gets sentenced in a month, and this fight and obviously the media uproar behind this case is not going to just end when he's passed. It could continue for months and for months, for years, however long, and you eventually do find that true piece of evidence that releases this person from all those crimes. How can you bring back that life? How can you do anything? How can you make up for your wrong? And that's the whole argument that I've been saying, that if there is that potential possibility of innocence, this should never be the sentence that an individual gets. And in this case specifically, when the sentence is in literally a month and there's all this presumption of doubt, is it really, you, Mr. Moral, is that morally okay to sentence somebody? And is that morally okay to kill them, even with all this potential innocence?
Well, I don't know the specifics of that case. I would imagine that media coverage would influence the decision to a certain degree. But like I said before I said anything, is that it would have to have a very high degree of evidence without a presumption of doubt. And it would be only in very rare instances. This
isn't a very, like, this, obviously there's a lot of presumption of doubt going on
what
now.
What is he convicted of?
Murder, I believe.
Murder? Okay. And he has a history of assault?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I read the story was that this girl, it was because there was like racial politics in it as well. I think she was married, a white couple, and she was sleeping with him. So people are questioning whether or not her husband actually murdered her because he was upset and he found out, or if he murdered her.
Well, on the topic of having the wrong person killed, how would you have the state make up for that, right? So say let's go.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. But what would happen? The state would be free, and they would be free of any.
It's like the
issues?
Central Park 5 story.
Yeah.
Seems familiar.
Yeah, in New York, I don't know when. I think it was the 80s or 90s. This group of like 5 teenage boys were convicted of raping a woman in Central Park, but they didn't. And the guy who really did it confessed. But they spent a long time in prison. They were like, the youngest was like 14. And they got millions of dollars from New York State when they got out and all of it came out. But you can't repay that. Like, you can't give, even when people are wrongfully convicted and get out decades later, like, money can't fix that. So there's absolutely no way you could
Your life is
pay back
lost.
someone's,
Especially from 14 to whenever they got out. It was
and
almost 20, over 20
one
years
of them
later.
was in a lot longer, and he was in adult prison. It's messy.
Yeah. Like, you can't, and even, okay, let's say you sentence somebody and they're actually innocent, and, it's their estate or they're a family, the next of kin, family, whatever. How much can you really pay back somebody for the loss of a loved one? You can't. It's never going to make up for it, especially if there's that presumption of innocence. You're never going to pay back that guilt, and you're never going to pay back that loss. You can't punish the state. Like, how do you punish the state? You're never going to win, really.
There's no oversight.
No. And at that time, they'll say at that time, from this, if you're looking at it from this standpoint, there's all the evidence pointed towards yes. So, we're not at fault here. You're never going to prosecute the state. You're never going to get true justice if you're looking at it from a justice perspective. And money does not equate to loss.
Right.
I agree.
So money, you can't fix stuff with money necessarily.
You can't pay back a life.
No.
Now, let's talk about if, let's say, the death penalty didn't exist. Like, in Canada, it doesn't exist. But do people deserve second chances?
I think it depends on the crime they committed.
Murderers, rapists.
No. And I think it also... so when you go up for parole, didn't Paul Bernardo just have a parole hearing and it was a big deal? And people were getting excited about it. I think you should be psychologically evaluated, and I think psychological professionals can probably figure out whether or not somebody's rehabilitated and can function in mainstream society or not. Mm-hmm. I would assume that, especially for rape, I would assume that they're probably not fit to live in mainstream society. I would say the circumstances of the murder matter, I think.
Sam?
I would say all non-violent offenders have the ability to rehabilitate and should be given a second chance. But I pretty much agree. Anyone that commits certain crimes like murder and rape or...
You also said drug trafficking should be on death row.
Sure.
They can't be rehabilitated?
Well...
You don't know.
Drug traffic. Someone that traffics fentanyl and knows that it murders thousands of people, I would...
What if they traffic like
cocaine?
Coke? Yeah. Or heroin.
Heroin, maybe.
But Coke is like...
You can overdose on cocaine.
Yeah, but I think there's a degree of nuance to it. But I think for especially like drugs like fentanyl, it's widely known that it kills thousands of people. And I think there's a degree of liability that should be attributed to people that traffic them. And you should be responsible for the people you deal it to.
But you're responsible for individual choices then?
No, well, if you cut Coke with fentanyl, you know that people are probably going to die. If you're it's deadly.
If you're distributing fentanyl or any other type of harmful drug into a community, you are responsible for people that overdose on it because it is going to vulnerable people that don't necessarily have the right state of mind or they're vulnerable, whatever, impoverished. So yeah, they do have some degree of responsibility and they should be punished.
And you don't think they can be rehabilitated?
No.
Really?
Not for that. Too many people get harmed by it.
Jessica, do you think that they can be rehabilitated?
It comes down to the individual, I think, a lot of the time.
Case-by-case basis?
Yeah. I mean, you can't say that all drug traffickers and all traffickers of fentanyl, which I 100% agree with you, is really not forgivable because it's not like there's an education behind cutting Coke with fentanyl. Like, it's going to have some repercussion. And a lot of that time it's death. I mean, you don't always know the circumstance, and that's why it has to be a case-by-case basis. I think somebody, for doing that, they do deserve to pay their sentence and pay their time. Do I know that could they be possibly rehabilitated? Yeah, again, it depends on the person as well. Like, you don't know what happens in prison. You don't know if they get education. They
right.
Born again into a new lifestyle. You don't know. That would really depend on the case for fentanyl specifically. murder and rape, for me personally, rape has no excuse. I don't think rapists could really be rehabilitated.
You think murderers can?
Depends on the murder.
Yeah, the circumstances of
You
the
don't
murder
know,
matter.
like if they're a serial killer and they like
Bruce MacArthur.
yeah, exactly. If they're a serial killer and they have a specific type and that is always going to be their victim, that's psychological. That's something messed up.
So should they be admitted to a mental health institution rather than put on death row?
Well, I don't think anybody should be put on death row. I think that they should be in prison. Yes, I think within prison they should go through a lot of serious therapy. I think that should be part of the process. But at the same time, like if you look at serial killers and the mind of a serial killer, there's very, very little chance, unless like you can like catch the signs from a very young age, there's very little chance that those habits and those tendencies will ever reside. That's part of their psychological makeup. And if they're going to act on it, and that they have a lot of victims under them, and that they are a risk for especially their, like Bruce MacArthur, I believe was members of the LGBT community, gay men. If you know that they're going to be a risk for those members of the community, then no, obviously not. They should repent for their crimes till they die, not lethally injected, but till they're off death row, till they're dead, basically.
Well, let's then move on to the last thing. And before I get to it, I just want to acknowledge our poll, which we didn't acknowledge in the beginning, but we asked the question, would you support the death penalty? And we had 74 votes with, let's click that, with 32 yes, 42 no, and the percentages were 57% against, 43% for. Now that we have everybody's opinions on the death penalty, let's make it personal. If your mother committed murder, would you vouch for her to get capital punishment?
No. I don't think anybody, unless my mom, like, I don't even,
If you believe that anybody should...
I think that the death penalty should exist in specific rare cases. If my mom killed somebody and, she could be up for the death penalty, I would absolutely not advocate. I think I can't see anybody advocating for their own mother to be executed.
Sam?
No, I think the fact making it personal
Changes things?
Yeah, and law is supposed to be impartial and logical, and
Yeah.
I would obviously never advocate for that because I think blood goes.
But you also
above
wouldn't be the judge
law.
that would
You
decide if your
have-
mom
yeah.
were
Exactly.
executed or not.
If a judge was deciding whether
Yeah.
his son or daughter was,
That would never happen.
it'd be a conflict of interest. It would never happen. So
A
I
huge
can't.
conflict
I
of
don't think I
interest.
could answer that yet.
And Jessica, obviously, the answer is no for you, right?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
regardless if it's my mother
In
or
that case,
not,
yes.
then yeah, I got some issues. Regardless if it was my mom or not, like, no, I don't think anybody should be sentenced. The longest prison sentence, where they're in solitary confinement, I think is personally, that's personally my preference, if you want to put it that way, over a death sentence. But no, like making it my mom the case subject, if I would be for lethal injection or be for the firing squad or not, that has no relevance because I wouldn't have any say in the legal system or the trial or whatever, and I wouldn't be for it if it was my mom or if it was for, I don't want to compare it to some criminal out there, but if it was for some ginormous criminal out there, so no, I wouldn't be for it.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd be in the same boat. I wouldn't advocate for it. But lastly, do you see Canada bringing back the death penalty?
No.
No.
No, Sam?
Probably not.
Probably not. Would you like Canada to bring it back,
Yeah.
Amara?
I in specific instances, I think Paul Bernardo should be executed,
But
but
just the ability to have the death penalty, do you think Canada
I
should
don't
bring
think
it back?
not right now. I think society has to progress before I would say that I would be confident that it would be used fairly.
Interesting. And Jessica?
Not until there's if there's ever going to be some presumption of innocence, no, it has no place.
Fair. Well, that's where we wrap up the show today. Clearly a lighthearted topic, but thank you to everyone that tuned in and that messaged us live. A brand new episode of the Raben Report will be coming to you next week, same day, same time, same people. Have a great day, everyone.